The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, hello everybody.
We hope all you listeners out there are having a great holiday season so far. And if you're listening to us on this Thursday, Beth is officially on vacation. And we're ready for some much needed rest and relaxation and some quality downtime.
Which starts with sleeping past 6 a.m. for the next several days.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
It's very important for my happiness and for your well-being. I'm less grumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yes.
I know to stay away from you when you haven't had enough sleep.
I know. It's wise. So last year in December, we dedicated an entire episode to Krampus, that long-tongued, child-snatching, terrifying companion to Santa Claus.
He's not that bad. If I had to pick one over the other, I think I'd choose Krampus.
Well, yeah, you would. So this year, we wondered if there are any other traditional Christmas-related characters who are equally as terrifying. And I have to say, I think we found a few.
Yeah, we sure did.
So sit down in your favorite chair, wrap up in a cozy blanket, and as you sip something warm and delicious, let us tell you all about some pretty creepy European characters that come out at Christmas time.
For children living in southwestern Germany, it's wise to be extra good for at least a couple of weeks leading up to Christmas, because that's when the long-tongued Belsnickel visits. Quite often he wears a mask over his face, and sometimes it's painted a devilish red. And like Krampus, his long pointed tongue hangs out of his mouth in a terrifying way. When he's not hiding behind a mask, the Belsnickel's face will be smeared with charcoal and deer antlers protrude from his dirty matted hair. His clothes are equally dirty and torn, and sometimes they are covered in bits of foliage or animal fur. In his hand, he carries a long switch, which he uses to swat all naughty children with. Now, the children don't exactly know when he might arrive, but if they hear something tapping on their windows in the dark month of December, it's undoubtedly him. They might as well answer the door, because Belsnickel is going to come in whether they welcome him in or not. But it's always a good idea to be welcoming towards him, because although Belsnickel is a menacing and scary man, he also carries candies and cakes in his deep pockets. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, what does he do exactly? Well, he punishes the naughty children, of course, whipping them with his switch, and he rewards the good children with sweets. Many German immigrants came to the U.S. and settled in Pennsylvania, and it seems Belsnickel followed them. Although, once he arrived in the U.S., he tended to dress in furs and carry a whole sack full of candies and cakes, rather than just stuffing his pockets. 1 to 2 weeks before Christmas, in the dark of night, Pennsylvania Dutch children might have heard a loud tapping on the window, just like the children in Germany. Their front door would fling open, and Belsnickel would just stand there before them. With swooping arms, he'd fling candies and small cakes and a cascade of sweets onto the floor. At the same time, he'd demand to know if they had all been good children. No matter how badly the children might have wanted to elbow their siblings out of the way and drop to the floor to grab as many sweets as they could, the children didn't dare, because if they did, they'd feel the burning sting of Belsnickel's switch. And in some cases, Belsnickel left nothing in a naughty child's stocking except a hazel switch. It's only the children who were patient enough and polite enough to answer his questions who avoided the stinging whip of his switch. German immigrants who settled in Indiana received visits from Belsnickel also. Again, 1 or 2 weeks before Christmas, usually when the children were alone in the house after dark because their fathers or older brothers were busy with some sort of chores outside, they'd hear rapping on the window or door. They too knew better than to hide from the Belsnickel. Although his clothing might be different, he was usually dressed in a long black or brown robe, tied at the waist by a rope, and he wore a fur hat. And the Belsnickel behaved the same way as he did in Pennsylvania. He'd burst into the house, demanding to know if the children had been good. He rewarded the good children with candy and beat the naughty children with his switch. Eventually, a kind of reverse Belsnickel tradition sprang up in parts of Pennsylvania. Groups of young men would dress up in masks and costumes made out of furs and run through the town ringing bells and rattling chains. They'd knock on their neighbors' doors and challenge their neighbors to correctly identify who each of them were behind their mask. If a neighbor guessed correctly, the young men would have to remove their mask. But if the neighbors guessed incorrectly, they'd have to treat the entire group to candies, cakes, and occasionally a little moonshine. So, obviously, none of the young men were the real Belsnickel, although this new tradition was called Belsnickeling.
That doesn't sound bad, getting a little nip of moonshine if you were able to trick your neighbors.
I know, because we love our moonshine.
Yeah, it doesn't sound bad at all.
Not at all.
So perhaps Belsnickel isn't quite as terrifying as Krampus, but Père Fouettard, or Father Whipper, might be. His backstory is pretty horrific. He first became St. Nicholas's companion in the Middle Ages, although why exactly isn't clear. There are several versions of his backstory, each one more disturbing than the last. The oldest version, which surfaced around the year 1252, is that an innkeeper and his wife captured 3 very wealthy young boys who were walking through the woods on their way to a religious boarding school. Although the innkeeper's initial plan was to rob them, he killed them, cut them into pieces, and made a stew out of them. When St. Nicholas heard about the horrific crime, he resurrected the children and forced the innkeeper to repent for his crimes by following him while he bestowed gifts on good children. Another version goes that there was once a butcher who was having a terrible time catching game to sell in his shop. One day, while out hunting in the woods, the desperate butcher noticed 3 little boys who were obviously lost. Eager to have something to sell in his shop, the butcher grabbed the boys, chopped them up, and put them inside a salt barrel. Now, luckily, St. Nicholas paid a visit to the butcher's shop, and he realized quickly that the butcher's best meat was actually human children. I told you they were nasty,
Well,
these backstories.
You wouldn't know unless somebody told you it was children.
Oh, but St. Nicholas knew he could tell, because he loves all children.
He's a bit of a goody two-shoes to me.
Distraught and angry, understandably, St. Nicholas pieced the boys back together, brought them back to life, and delivered them home to their grateful parents. And for whatever reason, like I said, no one really knows why, the butcher, now known as Père Fouettard, or Father Whipper, began visiting all the children with St. Nick. A third version of the backstory which is very different from the child-murdering ones, says that during the 1552 Siege of Metz, which is a city in eastern France, the people made 2 effigies. One, which was meant to be King Charles I, was set on fire and dragged through town. The other one was some sort of grotesque figure that was dressed like a tanner, but wrapped in chains. It carried a whip in its hand. Somehow, again it's unclear, the 2 effigies became one living man. And since it was the same time of year as St. Nicholas's visits, this Father Whipper character met up with him. So, no matter which backstory is true, Father Whipper is an ugly, massive man. He has long dark hair and a long dark beard. He wears a huge fur coat and carries a wicker basket over his shoulder and carries, you guessed it, a whip in his hand. But unlike children who are visited by Belsnickel, children who are visited by Father Whipper definitely know when he's on his way through town, because Father Whipper rattles chains, rings a bell, stomps his massive feet, and cracks his whip. Greedy and disrespectful children might find nothing but lumps of coal in their stockings, but that's getting off easy, because Father Whipper is way more likely to do what his name suggests, whip those naughty children. Or if they were particularly misbehaved, he will stuff them into his wicker basket like Krampus would, and he takes them away, never to be seen again. So he's similar in a way to Krampus, but this is, I don't think I said it at the beginning, maybe from butchering his French name, people figured out that he's a character that comes out in France at Christmas time, but I don't think I actually said that. But he's similar to Krampus.
Yeah, they are pretty similar, and they both punish naughty children by whipping them.
Yeah, which is, aggressive enough. But, I mean, that was okay back then.
Right.
Right.
But it's Iceland that seems to have the best contender, as far as equal to Krampus in nastiness goes. Well, we'll tell you all about that after this quick break.
Hey, did you know? I loved the Muppets as a kid, and I especially loved the Muppet Christmas Carol. So here are some facts in case you do too. George Carlin was originally supposed to play Scrooge, not Michael Caine. 95% of what Gonzo says as Charles Dickens is actually prose from the original book, making it the most textually accurate use of the novel to this day. The full-bodied walking scene of Kermit as Bob Cratchit with Robin on his shoulders took 10 puppeteers and a rotating drum. Bob and Mrs. Cratchit's kids, essentially Miss Piggy and Kermit's kids, all the girls are pigs and all the boys are frogs. Rolf the dog doesn't speak because Jim Henson had recently passed away and no one else was comfortable enough or good enough to mimic his voice as that character. The Muppet Christmas Carol was Brian Henson's first ever directing gig, and it was released on December 11th, 1992. That's 31 years ago. Who'da thunk it?
It's been that long ago?
Yeah, and it actually blew my mind where I had a moment and I had to text my best friend, Jess, because the whole time I was looking up the facts about the Muppet Christmas Carol, in my head, I had distinct memories of watching it when I was little. But then when I saw that it was released in 1992, I was like, wait, I was 17 in 1992. So how was I watching it when I was little? So obviously I wasn't. So I think in my mind, I was mixing up the timelines between the Muppet Christmas Carol and the John Denver Muppets Christmas special.
Okay.
Because that I definitely watched as a kid. And I had the album, like actual record album. And I used to play it all the time.
You had the album?
I did. I also had a little crush on John Denver, but, I was like 5 or 6. It came out in 1979. So the first time I would have seen it, I was like 3. So I'm thinking when I was like 5 or 6, I definitely had the album.
John Denver?
And the
Must
Muppets.
have been that hair. He kind of looked like a Muppet.
He did. No, he's got the top hat on and the scarf.
Right.
You can't really see the wicked bowl cut that he used to have. That was like a shaggy bowl cut. I don't know how you describe that haircut. But anyway, I loved that special and I loved that album. But I love the Muppet Christmas Carol even more.
Oh, I liked Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. That was my favorite.
I tried watching that and I couldn't get into it. I couldn't understand why people love it so much.
I always liked it. But the Muppets are great regardless of your age. I still watch clips of it on TikTok. I love the Swedish Chef.
Yeah.
And he still cracks me up big time.
I know.
I mean, who can resist the Swedish Chef?
I know. I just hear boink, boink, boink. Didn't he used to do that?
No, well.
Kind of.
Bork, bork.
Oh, Bork.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's chasing the chicken with his cleaver.
Come here, you little chicken.
It's timeless.
Well, anyway, we left off with a teaser about Iceland's creepy Christmas characters, so let's get back to it.
Every Christmas, the evil and hungry ogress Gryla comes down from her home in the mountains to stock up on naughty children. She collects as many as she can and cooks them in a stew before devouring them in a single meal.
I don't know what it is about these early characters and eating children in stews. They all have some chopping them up and putting them in stews.
Because these parents were busy and they did not have the time to put up with these kids' bullshit. So they scared the living hell out of them.
I was going to say something like, it's winter in these cold European countries where food was scarce and a constant concern. And so maybe that was why they have these characters that are eating naughty children.
Well, that could be too.
Right. But anyway, before Gryla goes on her gruesome Christmas grocery run, her 13 ogre sons cause all kinds of mischief. They are known as the Yule Lads, and they begin their nightly mischief on December 12th. The first 2 commit their pranks in the animal sheds. On the 12th, Stekjastar makes his way into as many sheds as he can so he can suckle milk directly from the sheep. Can you imagine? That's just so disturbing.
Yeah. I can almost picture it, and I don't want to.
It's disturbing. Giljagar comes down on the 13th, and he likes to slurp all the foam off of the milk that is still in buckets. The remaining ogre brothers, or Yule Lads, infiltrate people's houses. The next 3 seem to be attracted to kitchens. The smallest brother arrives on the 14th, attempting to steal any bits of food left in frying pans. The next one licks all the dirty spoons that were used to scrape out the dirty pots. And on the 15th, the next son goes even further by licking the dirty pots and pans themselves.
Well, that's not so bad. It's like they're cleaning up your dirty dishes for you.
Exactly. It's no worse than, when you go to put dishes in the dishwasher and your dog, licks the plates. It's the same idea, right?
I don't know. I never used my dishwasher.
Oh, so you didn't have any dog plate licking going on?
No, none whatsoever.
All right, well. Of the remaining 8 Yule Lads, a few of them hide under beds, slam doors, and peep through windows. The rest like to steal things, from yogurt to sausages to candles.
But by far, the Yule lad's mother, Gryla, is the scariest of Christmas creatures, with her 13 tails. It's said that she listens for whispers all year long about the antics and misdeeds of children, collecting tidbits on every child in the area. She purposely targets the kids who have the longest list against them. Then, as I said, she descends her mountain on Christmas and skulks around the town, snatching children and stuffing them in a giant sack. When her sack is full, she brings them back to her lair, where she boils them in a stew. If she's made her stew rich enough with the meat of naughty children, her stomach will remain full for a whole year. Stories of Gryla were so terrifying that in the 1700s, Iceland's parliament outlawed parents from scaring their children with stories about her. Perhaps if they stopped talking about her, she'd go away. But she hasn't disappeared entirely, although her taste for human flesh seems to have gone away. These days, Gryla is blamed for leaving rotten potatoes in the shoes belonging to children who misbehave.
Well, that's better than eating them. Although a rotten potato's going to stink after a while. Let's hope it's just overnight.
Well, since they probably wear their shoes every day, I think they're safe.
The Yule lads and Gryla aren't it, though. Iceland is also home to the monstrous Yule cat. Although she wasn't written about until the 1800s, oral stories of the Yule cat have existed since the Dark Ages. Many people in Iceland have practiced a tradition for many, many years, in which they always give their children some sort of brand new clothing item for Christmas. This stems from the horrible visits their ancestors used to have from the Yule cat. In the past, new clothes were traditionally presented to any children who did all their chores before Christmas. But if a child was lazy or procrastinated, they wouldn't receive new clothes as a gift, and the Yule cat would come for them. Now, we aren't talking about some small house cat. We're not even talking about a mountain lion-sized cat. The Yule cat was as big as a house and as dark-furred as a stormy winter night. She would sneak up to the windows to peer inside with her massive yellow eyes. She watched patiently until she was satisfied that she had seen every new present. If she saw new clothes, then she would move on to the next house. But if she didn't, the Yule cat would pounce on the child, snatch it up with her sharp teeth, and gulp it down as her Christmas meal. The Yule cat, by the way, was Gryla's pet. I'm assuming that Gryla, the Yule lads, and the Yule cat are still out there in Iceland somewhere, holed up in their mountain cave, waiting for a Christmas when they can all come back out and terrify people.
But until then, we can always go back to southern Germany, to the border along Austria and Switzerland, to look for the Frau Perchta in the Alps. Although, I kind of hope we don't find her, or that she doesn't have a reason to find us. Frau Perchta is a classic old hag, dressed in old rags and assisted by a walking cane. Due to her one large and misshapen foot, she is also recognizable due to her long, crooked, and pointy nose. Now, before you feel sorry for her, you have to understand that she also carries a very sharp knife hidden inside her skirt, and she is not nice. She makes her rounds during the 12 days of Christmas, and she looks for one specific thing: foolish women.
Oh.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
I'm not saying anything. To her, a foolish woman is any woman that doesn't have all their flax spun to make linen by January 6, and those who haven't left out a bowl of porridge for her to eat. With all their chores and household duties, it might be excusable to us for a woman to fall behind when it came to preparing her flax for weaving. But Frau Perchta doesn't see it that way. And finding these lazy women makes her very, very angry. She might simply set their flax on fire, ruining their chances at weaving new linens. But she might do far worse also. She'll wait until the woman has gone to bed, then sneak into their bedroom in the middle of the night. She'll pull out her knife from the folds of her skirt, and before the offending women can even wake up to defend themselves, Frau Perchta will disembowel her. If that's not bad enough, Frau Perchta will stuff the cavities with rocks and straw and sew the women back together again.
She's probably the nastiest.
That she is.
She's worse than Krampus, I think.
If Frau Perchta happened to discover that the women's children were particularly misbehaved, she'd snatch them from their beds and carry them off with her. Now, some stories of Frau Perchta include a posse of demon-like servants who all look like Krampus. And she also leads an army of lost souls who fly through the night with her. Altogether, they take part in a wild hunt, which, if you're lucky, you'll only hear as thunder and wind during specific winter nights. But if members of the wild hunt see you, they might insist that you come along on their battle against ghostly or demonic enemies.
So, I guess the bottom line is, Krampus is not the only scary St. Nick companion out there, by far. There are definitely others. And whether they actually team up with St. Nick or if they fly solo, it doesn't really matter. For a lot of places, winter is a pretty scary time. For good reason.
That it is. I mean, you have to worry. I mean, back then, you think about it. I mean, winter was just ungodly.
Right.
I mean, you had to have all your crops in and everything, or it was going to be a bad winter. If you didn't have enough wood, if you didn't have enough food.
And if you didn't have all your flax spun so that you could make clothing for the coming months.
Right. So you could see where it was such a scary time. But anyways, the Frau Perchta, she takes the cake.
She's wicked.
Yeah, she is nasty. I definitely don't want to see her show up.
Can you imagine waking up and your wife is just laying in bed and you're like, come on, you lazy woman, get up. And then you realize that she's now stuffed with straw and rocks.
Yeah.
And that all that was done and you didn't even wake up.
Well, at least they didn't wake me up.
Nice.
That's kind of sad.
That's horrible.
Isn't
it? Yeah.
Well, I need my sleep.
Right. It's good for your happiness and my well-being.
Yeah. Yeah, but who's going to spin the flax?
I don't even know how one would begin to even do that. I mean, I could knit a scarf with some yarn, but I don't think you could give me a spinning wheel and I could be very successful with any of that.
Well, with YouTube these days, I'm sure you could figure it out.
That's true. That's true. Well
wow.
That was a simultaneous well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, enough of us going on. We hope you all enjoyed the episode, and we wish you all a Merry Christmas for those of you that celebrate it.
Yes, we do.
And we'll see you all next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
Check our sources in our show notes if you want to know more. See you soon.
Wow. That's right. Check out our sources in our show notes.
You went right into our ending and you completely forgot the sources stuff.
Well, they know they're there. We don't have to tell them every time.
They know our shtick.
Our listeners are smart.
I know, they are. They know what we're about to say before we say it.
That's right, they do. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everybody.